Gil, and I'll be the moderator. I have the honor to be the moderator to this Building the Esports Pyramid panel. I think before we jump in and start, I wanted to make sure I gave a huge shout out and thanks to BizzTalk for organizing this event. It's an amazing event. I also want to thank the audience. I have no idea how many people we have, but I see a whole bunch of names. So hopefully there's a lot of people, and we sure hope you get value out of our conversation today. Also, our main and title sponsor for the conference, Boa Compra. I hope I said that correctly with my Spanish accent. So Boa Compra is the sponsor, and actually we have to thank them as well to make sure that this is possible today. So before we jump in, I wanted to provide to the audience a little bit of a high level of what we're trying to do today. Obviously, we're talking about the building the esports pyramid. You know, kind of like the plan would be just to have few introductions from your panelists. Then we'll jump into through few themes to have a discussion throughout, and hopefully we'll have enough time towards the end or the second half for either open roundtable conversation or also Q&A as well. So I think at a high level, that's the plan. So with that, I'll introduce myself, and then from that, I'll hand it to our excellent panel that we have today. So like I said at the beginning, my name is Miguel Gil, and I'm essentially, the way I always have to want to describe myself is, you know, I'm a father, I am a husband, I am a super curious learner, and I'm actually a terrible gamer. So I have to make that confession right off the bat. I'm terrible at gaming. I didn't grow up gaming. However, I love the industry, and it's amazing in the industry to be part of. A little bit about me. I'm the founder of the United States Esports Association. We are a nonprofit with our core mission to foster the growth of recreational esports in the US. I'm also an advisory board member for another wonderful nonprofit. It's called Gamers Outreach. If you don't know who Gamers Outreach, I encourage you to go and look them up, gamersoutreach.org. It's a great nonprofit as well. And from a gaming perspective, I spent about 13 years working at Xbox, mostly around the hardware team. So that's essentially where I had most of my experience in the gaming industry itself. And now with a foundation, just jumping on into more of the esports. So just a little bit about who I am and why, you know, I have the honor to be part here of your moderator. And I just want to give it to the panelists. So I think I'm going to excuse myself for pronunciations, but we have Spiro, we have Kramer Nielsen, and we have Nicolas Crispo. I'm going to let you guys go each one by one to introductions, and then hopefully we'll start the panel. So why don't we start, since I'm going to start at the order that I see you guys on the screen. So Spiro, you're on my left, so I'll start with you first. Then we go to Christian, and then we go to Nico.
Thanks, Miguel. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Spiro Curry with the Gaming Stadium. The Gaming Stadium is a company that was founded in Canada late 2018. And in June of 2019, we opened Canada's first dedicated esports facility. So we are parallel to a typical community center. And what we do on a daily basis is we have our facility open for anybody who wants to come in and utilize our equipment, whether it's for training, development, just gaming online with their friends. But also 5 days a week, we run dedicated tournaments that are focused on building community within certain games. And so we use every major or minor game out there. We let our community kind of dictate what tournaments and events they'd like to see. But we're a dedicated esports facility. You know, about 2 months ago when COVID started to hit in Canada, we had to make an adjustment. And so our facility itself is closed at the moment. And what we're doing is we're running online tournaments. So we've entered into a very competitive field when it comes to online, whereas as a facility, we kind of had a blue ocean. We didn't really have a lot of competitors in the space. So it's forced us to change the way that we approach esports from a business perspective. And we've done a couple other things specifically on the broadcast side that's really helped us, get through this time and probably what's going to be another 5 or 6 months. So, that's high level who the gaming stadium is. We're looking to open 3 additional locations in Canada over the next few months here. We've already got our locations secured. It's just a matter of waiting out COVID and then being able to get into construction and opening. And we're also adding different elements to our offering. So quick introduction into who we are, and I look forward to chatting a bit more with everyone later.
Christian.
Yeah, hello everybody, and nice to hear from you, Spiro. Super interesting with your facility. Yeah, my name is Christian Kramer Nielsen, as said. I am one of the first lucky persons to work with esports as an esport consultant in Denmark. Approximately 3 years ago, I started working for a partly governmentally funded organization called DGI. In Denmark, we have a ton of, we call them unions, which is like they host sports facilities like football, soccer, handball, etc. And they wanted to look into esports and help all these different unions facilitate esports. So I've been helping setting up a team, and we are 14 people now working together to start making a lot of different esport clubs. And at the time now we have 200. So we went from 4 to 200 in just 3 years. So we're building the width of esports in Denmark at the moment. Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty quickly.
Thank you, Christian. Nico.
Whoa, guys, I feel like 1 hour won't be enough. I'm really interested in what you're doing. My name is Nicolas Crispo. I firstly am a business consultant, and started working in esports by a mistake like 8 years ago. I had an injury for playing basketball, and a company called me to play for them, and they paid me. So it was a weird experience. From then on, I started looking more into the esports scene, not so much about the video game for recreation. I founded a team. After that, I founded an association, which I am working right now. We have 3 years. And mainly we have a different focus on how to work with esports. We take the video game as a tool for 3 different purposes. The first one is to build a sport industry. The second is to create educational programs with the video game to make people learn about different things, not just the industry, but also about sports and other stuff. And the other one, the third one is about social development. We work with different municipalities, states, and so in Argentina to start growing the community, and also in different programs, for example, like how to have your first driving lessons in a municipality with a simulator and stuff like that. And 2 years ago, I built a consultancy company called Gaming Solutions, with which we work in all Latin America with different football clubs, companies, different states, building the esports industry inside of them.
Excellent. So thank you, guys. Thank you, panelists. So before we jump into our first theme, I think I wanted to provide you guys, the audience, a little bit more of the thought process that went behind defining the subject for this panel. As you see, all of us in the speakers table, sort of, we hold different experiences. So when Dirk and I were initially talking about how do we want to frame this panel in. Well, it is very common that if we treat esports as a pyramid, we always know that more than likely what's very organized and what everybody knows from a mainstream perspective is the top of the pyramid, which is the professional level. But as you start going down the pyramid, you start going to the base of the pyramid, that's where things start not to get so much organized or in a way structured. So there is no clear path from being a young kid until you want to get to be a professional player in a way. So that's a little bit of the thought process of why we thought building the esports pyramid is kind of like the subject and the theme. And then the other reason why we want to have a diverse panel like we have today, because we have, you know, even from a geographical perspective, we have Christian from Denmark, and Denmark, from at least from a Western perspective, is one of the countries that are, I would say, are mostly advanced in the way to structure esports. And there's something that a lot of us in any other country can learn from. So that's one of the big reasons of why we have Christian in the panel. Then you have both Spiro and myself representing kind of like North America for Canada and the US. And also Nico from a perspective of a Latam. So that's why we think that we wanted to bring that panel and hopefully gives value to the audience. So I think our first subject that we wanted to bring up and open for discussion is a little bit of the notion of, you know, you've heard us talk about either recreational or amateur esports. And I think these are two terms that are very used, intertwined in the industry. And I wanted to open it up to discussion for the panel is, do we know, are they different? Do we need to define them? Do we need to provide a different perspective between recreational and amateur? And a little bit on that is to say that, you know, usually you hear on the amateur level or the grassroots level, so esports and the tournaments, they're most of the times they are linked to some sort of award, and that award being money, right? So for some sort of pricing. So the question is, do we need to make a distinction about that part of the amateur and grassroots level and also recreational, when it's more about just doing it for the joy of the game and more as like that entry point where you're a kid and then you start going through the journey? So that's kind of like the thought process behind that theme. And I just wanted to open it to the panel to provide their perspectives. So any of you guys, I'm not defining an order on these ones. So.
Sure, I'd love to chip in. First of all, a really good question, I think, Miguel. Actually, a question about whether we should distinguish between recreational and amateur esports, I believe is super relevant at the moment, because many people are having a hard time defining these two things, especially when they come from out of the esport community or out of the gaming community. It's hard to see when something goes from being recreational to being a bit more amateur-like. And the way as I see it, I believe that the recreational way of playing games is more gaming-based and is a more non-ambitious way of spending your time. It has I don't know, a little relaxed sound to it, and you do not really strive to become better. You do it more for the relaxation and the peace of mind, I believe. But when I hear amateur esports, I hear a person or a team maybe who are actually trying to maybe strive towards winning or striving towards becoming a better player at the game or a better team at the game. And they can be ambitious as well, even though they're not playing on the highest level. I believe that distinguishing between these two is super relevant at the moment, but it's super hard for many people to tell, because the amateurs that don't have a scene at the moment, where can you see them? Where do they play? Are they on Twitch? Are they playing in tournaments that are being broadcasted anywhere or something like that? I believe this is a super important question, and I'll just I'll leave it there.
Well, in my side, we have a course for kids from 9 to 13 years old. And the main topic that we teach them is what's the difference between playing a video game and playing it as a sport, okay? And I think that the main focus that that we should have into account is that what's the switch that you have to change in your head to change the focus with which you do what you do. In this case, for example, it's not the same playing a video game, at least from a personal point of view. Even if you play ranked in the game and you try to escalate in the ranking, it's not the same as playing it as a sport with a team or inside of a competition. So the first main topic to change, I think, to know at least what's amateur and what's otherwise playing just video games recreational would be that point. And from then on, I think that in sports, the difference between amateur and professional is what's the focus that you take when you play it. For example, all the participants in amateur basketball competition should have the focus on learning. And in a semi-professional competition of any sport, the focus should be in learning, but also in developing the skills more and more, and also trying to make it a profession. And in a professional way, is more a spectacle than a sport. So in that point on, your focus is on getting your abilities into the highest possible, but also making a living out of it. That's my point of view on this subject.
Yeah, no, well said. Both parties, I tend to agree. You know, I grew up in a bit of a traditional sports background and playing and coaching. So the word amateur is probably defined a little bit differently for me personally. But when I look at these two words, I have a pretty clear distinction. Recreational for me is people who are just looking to have fun. Someone like me in my mid-30s who still enjoys playing video games, but wants to have fun playing it, and I'm not looking to get involved in a high-level competition or join a professional team. I'm strictly doing it for the fun of playing, whereas amateur is somebody who's trying to go professional, but hasn't quite reached that level yet. They could be in training and development. They could be in college, for example, and trying to get their skills honed in. Amateur sports, you know, specifically speaking from a North American lens, is defined as like somebody who wants to participate as a professional, but currently isn't getting paid enough to do it full time. And so that's kind of how I see the difference. Recreational being more fun, playing with your friends and competing on a less competitive level, and amateur being somebody who really wants to go pro, but hasn't quite had the opportunity to do it as a full-time job yet.
Well, that's really cool what you just said, and it's something that I'm having a lot of discussions here with different football clubs and government, because the thing that lacks in esports, at least here in Latin America, is the ladder to go from a clear ladder to go from amateur to professional. You have kids winning $1 million. We have a case like that in Argentina, playing Fortnite, and he has 13 years old. But it's like a weird sense of possibilities that it's not for everyone. But if you want to start your career in basketball, you know that if you start at 10 years old, at least until you have 16, 17, 18, you won't have a chance to win money out of it. And you won't play professional. You have different levels of amateurism, but in this case, in esports, you don't have it. And one of the things that we try to build here in Argentina is to separate the better players from the soon-to-be better players. And because that was a problem. You had a competition for, I don't know, $2,000, and you had the best teams playing it. But you had a tournament for an hamburger, and they were there too. So you couldn't play anywhere. And I think that's one of the important things that we should start building together as a community everywhere, to start having a clearer answer to what's amateur and what's professional.
Nico, thank you. Oh, sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's great thoughts. I was also thinking recreational, as you said, Spiro. That
Either is fine. Don't
recreational.
worry, Chris. All good.
Cheers. But the recreational is more focused on the relaxation. I believe we're going to talk the most about the amateurs today and how to build the esport pyramid from the very bottom. But I also believe the recreational part has value to it itself. In Denmark, we see that many video games are being used like as a helpful tool for autistic kids or kids with ADHD or Asperger's. And many of the clubs we have, they actually finance their facilities by hosting classes with these kids who get, they both get funding from different associations, etc., who help them thrive in the community. And it actually gives a lot of value in like a social learning kind of way for these groups. And maybe also some of the groups that are not that, focused on school, etc. It can be a motivational tool as well. But yeah, I think the next thing which is really interesting to discuss is definitely this amateur definition, because we have a ton of semi-professionals here in Denmark, and I don't know what the fuck a semi-professional person is anyway. It's like, I've been going to a LAN once as well, and I won some of the stuff that you could put underneath your mouse, right? But that doesn't make me a semi-professional, does it? But that's interesting.
Thank you, guys. And I think we started to naturally kind of take the conversation towards our next subject. Before we do that, and I do the natural transition, I just wanted to add one thing, which is it's great for the audience to understand also that, different countries and regions of the world obviously have different ways to do things. So you'll hear more, and I believe this is true also from a Canada perspective, and Spiro, keep me honest here, but at least in the US, a lot of times, especially in traditional sports, you don't have, how do I say this? You don't have a government involvement, meaning there is not such thing as a Ministry of Sports that actually is involved in promoting sports for a country, right? And that's kind of like how it is usually in the US. And I'm not sure if in Canada it's the same or not. But in other regions of the world, definitely, and we've heard both Christian and Nico talk about it, there is some sort of role that the government plays. And I'm not saying this from a perspective of good or bad. I'm just saying this a different way and a different variable on how it's done. And also that brings either pros and cons to many things, one of them being funding. So we heard from Christian saying how also having some government support actually helps the funding that the nonprofit needs or the organization like DGI needs to actually work on behalf of the industry. So these are little nuances that we're going to be bringing along the discussion, and especially, being focused on Latam is very interesting to hear Nico's perspective, because Nico is actually in the region, living it day by day. And I have a confession to make. I'm actually from the region as well. I'm originally from Venezuela, but I've been out of Latam as a region for a long time, so I don't have the insight and the knowledge that actually Nico has. So with that, let me transition to the next subject, which was naturally that what is, if there's anything, that path to go from a recreational player, so let's say that kid, or even the family that is 8 years old, because when you're a kid and you're 8 years old, when you start going to go to a traditional sport or to esports, it really is a family matter, right? The parents are involved in supporting that conversation. So what is the path to go from there until potentially being a professional or semi-professional player? And we started to have that conversation already, but what I wanted to do is, I don't know if it's even possible that we as an industry try to start defining that, but at the very least, for each of the different countries, maybe we start agreeing on some of those general steps that we take. And obviously they'll be different because of the how each country is managed, but I think Nico alluded to it, and I'm gonna let you start, Nico, on this one. Is just talking about, what are the, key steps that you guys are doing, and how we as different organizations representing different areas of the world can work together on this as well.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. Well, the first thing that we talked with the different members of the association was, are we going to start building this from scratch, or should we search for information that other sports have and also they implement already? And we started searching for this documentation to know from where to start, and we found a lot of interest documents. For example, there's a few basketball clubs in Australia that work as a parents kids coach guide, that it's really cool. We found a few clubs from Europe, from the amateur scene. We have who have referees parents guide, and so on. So we have a really strong focus in how to communicate the kids with their parents, the parents with the coach from the team, the parents with the referee. And in this point of view, it's really important to know that in an amateur scene, which is or recreational even, which is when a person starts playing as a kid, is that it should all be mainly focused on education. It's and the main example that we always use is in a professional level competition. If you commit a fault, I just penalize you, and that's it. It's you can do this, okay? You have a red card. But in an amateur scene, I should put you the red card, but I should also explain you why I did it and what is wrong in what you did. So I think that, I don't know if it answers the question, but is the point in this is to focus in education in the amateur scene with the kids. They just play for fun, and they see YouTubers and influencers which they just play for fun and make a lot of money, so they think that they can do it, which they can, but it probably is a matter of time. And kids in sports, in my personal view, is that they don't have the same sense of time that we that are a little bit older have. They think that in 12 hours or 15 days they will go pro if they just focus on it. But we know that it might take 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. So it's important to teach them the concepts behind learning.
Yeah. This is a pretty difficult question, and I'll start with a story and then jump into why I think it's difficult and complicated. So, first of all of us have now grown up with an inherent system that traditional sport uses to ladder you through the stages from being a youth player to a pro player. The story is, my parents are from Lebanon, and they moved to Canada right before I was born. And when I was in kindergarten, I was 5 years old, our local hockey association came to our school, and they handed out these pieces of paper, and it said, if you want to play ice hockey, it's $99. Here's the list of equipment that you need, and you show up at this time on this day. And so I was able to take that piece of paper to my father and say, Dad, I really want to play hockey. Here's one piece of paper that tells you everything that you need to do as a dad. And he was able to take that and turn it into putting me on the ice. In esports, that doesn't exist right now. And there's, in my opinion, a very distinct reason. And this is where it gets complicated, is I think a lot of times we try to compare the esports industry to the traditional sports industry, and it's a wrong comparison, because in traditional sports, the ladder system is different for every sport. So soccer, hockey, basketball, baseball, they all have their different system because the rules of each game are so different. And so people who want to excel in one focus on that one. Sometimes you'll get multi-sport athletes, but when they hit a point in their career that they have the opportunity to do one or the other professionally, they have to make that distinction and go down that path. The problem with esports right now is we're painting it all under the same brush. And we're saying, you want to be an esports pro, there has to be a path. Unfortunately, I don't think it's that simple. I think every game has its own set of unique skills that's needed to play, and the ladder system needs to be defined for each game specifically. Now, easier said than done, but a League of Legends player and a Fortnite player have two very different skill sets. So to implement a ladder system for esports is not going to serve people the right way based on the game that they're playing. Here's the problem with that. Again, another problem is those games are owned by developers who have full control over the IP. And so the issue then becomes you dedicate all of this time to putting someone in a ladder system for a game like Overwatch, for example, and maybe by the time they're ready to go pro, that game doesn't exist anymore, or that game has been superseded by a secondary game or a third game. And so that's the inherent problem is in traditional sport, you've got governing bodies that govern that sport and are meant to keep that sport going for a long period of time. Whereas in esport, the main titles are dictated by the person who made that game. And at any point, if they feel like that game isn't profitable anymore or driving new players, or it's not really something that falls into the business's guidelines, they'll create a new one, or they'll shelve it, or they'll cut the servers off. And so it's a very difficult question to ask because we're almost at the mercy of the developers who are creating the games that define esports. And in our chat, Andre asked the question, like, do you think that a franchise or closed system erodes or enhances the basis of the esports pyramid? And I think it erodes it, because when you don't have that control at the top, like, how can you really define a path for someone and guarantee them that in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, there's going to be a pro scene in that title for them to play in? So yeah, super complicated question to answer. And I still think because esports is so new, we're only hitting the tip of the iceberg as to how we define that as we go forward.
Well, this is really a cool topic and something that I've been discussing a lot lately. And I will just give you some thoughts that I have to see if you can help me clarify it. What I think is that players shouldn't be considered a player of a particular game, but you should be considered a player for a genre of games. And I will give you an explanation on this. I used to play professional League of Legends, okay? But before that, I used to play professional Dota 1 player. And after that, I played Heroes of New Earth. And then I played Dota 2, but the servers were awful in Latin America, so I jumped into League of Legends. And after that, I played Heroes of the Storm, and I also played Smite. And every MOBA that goes out, now I play mobile because the games are shorter. But I play it, and I can play it at not the best level, but I can play it top level, pretty easy. And the same goes for any shooter player. If you are good at Counter-Strike, you are probably going to be good at Valorant or Call of Duty, okay? If you are good at Fortnite, it won't be hard for you to play Free Fire or PUBG. So what I'm thinking is that maybe the players should focus on a genre, and then you can choose your main skill path, and then you say, okay, now the best game that I should play because it's the more profitable, it's PUBG. Okay, I'm going to go with PUBG. If PUBG dies, like the Heroes of the Storm, that one day they decided that it was not going to be an esport. Okay, now I can jump to Free Fire. I have the best players of Latin America in PUBG playing in a Free Fire team, and they are killing it. So that's what I thought, but I don't have the idea completely formed. So if you guys can help me out with this, would be a really cool international cultural development.
I mean, I can help. I want to have that conversation offline for sure. Christian, you have thoughts here?
Yeah, I got some thoughts. First of all, Spiro, I loved your story on ice hockey and how they like handed out these vouchers in order for you to come and play. You're totally right. I think the main issue here is that the risk is enormous for a player that wants to go pro in a game. Like in order to be spotted, in order to be seen, and the amount that you have to train and the amount that you have to like market yourself and everything, it's extremely hard, and the competition is enormous. So when you compare time spent trying to become a professional, or at least a semi-professional, or making a name, like the investment in your own time trying to become this is it almost can't pay off at the very moment. It's so hard to see the top from standing when you're just playing in your spare time. And I think that every other sport has started like building communities from the bottom, like you know, football and everything, and local clubs and everything has been locally, been going out playing with each other, where we've started kind of like digitalized and worldwide in esports. And we've started with leisure gaming, just playing for fun, then came the tournaments, then came the high level competition. And for some reason, these stories that are being told in the esports scene about these players just sitting at home, watching their big brothers play the game, then sitting in front of the computer every time they got off the computers, and then just practicing. It seems like it's the gap between being a leisure time player and becoming a professional is super narrow. And I believe it has been, but I believe that the gap has become way more wide at the time being. Like the professionals, the way they structure themselves, the way they deal with mental pressure, the way they deal with all of this stuff, it's become so much more advanced. Like the sports themselves have progressed so vast. So if you want to make it into just becoming like close to the professional teams, it would take you'd need to be bred in like the environment of good players, and there are not that many places where you can go and be a part of communities that play on these high levels as a beginner or as a starting player. Not many are investing in these academy teams or anything like that, so it's super hardcore. And then Nico, you talked about that there has to be like some sort of focus on learning, and that you can transfer these skills from the different genres. I believe it makes perfect sense. And I also see many Counter-Strike players trying to transfer to Valorant if they've been professionals before and they're not hitting the good teams anymore, or the good checks or anything like that. So they're transferring in a hope that Valorant will become big enough by the like just because that the organizers and the viewers that they're going to stick to that game. And it's a huge risk. They don't know if they're going to get it. But I believe that creating more clubs or creating more academies and using these players that are not playing the top level, using them to become teachers, using them to become trainers for all the ones who are hoping to become the best. I mean, there's a vast market of people who are striving to become the best every single day, spending hours and hours and hours, and they can spend their time better. Because you don't become the best just by playing 16 hours a day. You become the best by spending 8 good hours a day, in my opinion, at the very least. So I believe when you like offer like esport facilities or something like that, you have to really distinguish between, is this an esport facility or is this an internet cafe? Are you like really trying to focus on the learning part, or are you focusing on people having fun or playing tournaments or progressing through that? Not to be fronting you or anything, Spiro, because that what you have works where you are, and it makes perfect sense. But you have to distinguish between these things. So yeah, I think there's right now there's a great opportunity to capitalize in the market on these vast amount of players wanting to go somewhere and to learn. And I believe that the best arenas to learn is not just online. It has to be local. It has to be somewhere where you go on boot camp every now and then. Something like
that. Hey guys, I just want to jump in because this is turning into a fascinating discussion for also the next subject. And I think, you know, for the respect of timing, that we don't have much time left. And I want to make sure that we open the floor for a couple of questions. And thanks, Spiro, for accounting some of those questions. But one thing I wanted to add and hopefully transition the conversation is, One, I'm gonna have to watch the replay of these because there's so many nuggets of information that are amazing that I think we're all gonna learn. But the second one is, I actually think I have a little bit of a different perspective, and I think that it's kind of like a mix of a little things that you guys said. So I really like the concept, Nico, of having the skills per genre or game, Spiro. I mean, those are, you guys are spot on. Like, you being skilled at one genre or game within that genre is totally different than the other. But I also think there is a horizontal level where there are basic skills that any professional esports players need to have. One of them, Christian, is exactly what you're saying, which is, I don't make it professional and last for a long time by grinding 15 hours a day. No one can do that. I don't care if you want to be a professional football player, NBA player, you want to be the next Bill Gates, or whoever you want to be. If you want to be a high-performing individual, you have to be balanced. You have to understand. You have to eat well, sleep well. You're going to have mental fitness. I mean, you have to be a balanced individual. So I think there's like a horizontal level or a base level where there are certain things. Also is team playing, right? I have to learn the reason why you get, 18-year-old professional sports player really ready to perform at the highest level is because they also been playing throughout this whole life of, I play in a team. I know I'm being coached. I know I have to interact with my friends. I know if I talk smack to other ones, I have to actually then GG and handshake, right? Or so these are all these activities that no matter how you grow in your path, we also, as people that are in the industry to help make that happen, can work together. And yes, at a certain point, we have to shift the conversation towards what Nico and Spiro were talking, but there is a basic level need, and I think we can also help on that. So with that, I want to transition to building a pipeline. How do we actually build a pipeline? And we've been talking a lot about it, but I want us to say, how do we as an industry, and hopefully us representing different organizations, kind of continue on that process? And Nico, to your point, how do we build it together? How do we take your opinions and your plan with Christian's and Spiro's and ours, and then keep moving and pushing this forward to the next generation of potential esports professionals, and also for the sake of the industry itself? So with that, I'll ask you guys to jump in really quickly. And I want to try to do this in 4 minutes, so at least we leave the last 10 minutes of the session for a few questions that are in the chat right now. So I'll go with you, Spiro, if you jump on this one first.
Yeah, sure. So I think what Christian said is very apt, and I think facilities are important. It's why we built ours and why we're building more, because there does have to be a distinction. And our facility, first and foremost, is for dedicated events and for coaching and training. So when I go back to the story I told about being 5 and playing hockey, like, I now have a 2-year-old. And in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, if he says, oh, I'd love to try to pursue esports as a career, where's that piece of paper going to come from? And then where are they going to go to actually take part in that initiative? And that's what we're trying to build. That's the genesis of why our facilities are being built, is to provide that place for people. So I think for me, being biased based on what I do for a living, the answer to me is you have to have a place for people to go, because they have to be able to get out of their house. They have to be able to interact with the community. They have to be able to test their skills against other people in person. And they have to feel the pressure of what it's like to play in front of other people, because that's a large part of what happens with becoming a professional. And so for us at the facility, we actually have players that we sponsor, local players, and we fly them all over the world to compete in events. And what we do is, when we host our tournaments at our facility, part of the reason we're doing them is to try to find that talent, that next level of talent, and not to take them to the professional level. It's to get them the exposure by going to these large events and competing against other people in new places. And then hopefully when they're there, they're getting discovered, or they're performing well enough that a pro team comes along and says, we'd love to have you as a part of our roster. So last year, we had a Division 4 CSGO team that ended up winning the 4th division and moved up to the 3rd division. Half of the team got poached by a Division 2 team. And so that's amazing. We want that to happen. And so I'm speaking from a biased perspective, but in my opinion, that's how we're kind of aiding in the pipeline being filled.
Cool. Christian and Nico, I feel like one of these news reporters. I'm gonna ask you guys to jump in 30 seconds or so. So I really wanna bring on a question from I believe Rick Minaj. So let's just do this really quickly so we can at least address that question as well.
All right. So you want us to answer the question that he...
Oh, well, yeah. So why don't we do that if you guys don't mind? So Rick is asking how important are schools and colleges to the grassroots scene and how it can help the development of the industry. And I'll give 15 seconds because I know we don't have enough time to discuss this for sure. We all are passionate about the subject, but I mean, they are super important. I think they are part of that pipeline that we're trying to talk at the last level. And again, depending on which country you are, they'll have a different role and different place to play here. And again, I'll play the role here of saying, you know, from a North America perspective, collegiate and high school sports at a high level are a lot bigger and a lot more organized than in other countries of the world. And that's why I'm making that distinction, just to say that it won't look one way or the other, but definitely that doesn't mean that they're super important. So with that, I'll open the floor, and Christian, I'll let you go, then Nico, and then Spiro.
Cheers. First of all, Spiro, amazing. I didn't know you were that focused on building players and teams in your facility. It's absolutely amazing to hear. You're really organizing them and helping them organize themselves, which is, I believe, one of the most important parts about becoming a better player and team at the moment. It's getting these powerhouses. I'm talking a lot about powerhouses in esports because I believe many players trying to facilitate and organize themselves from home with their friends or whoever they find online on the matchmaking systems. Oh man, they're going into a rough storm, and like just building a team and sticking together. It's you've seen the esports scene. People are falling away from the teams that they're building up as soon as they start almost. It's a super fragile scene, but there's something happening at the moment, and people are starting to understand that you have to invest in each other and you have to go through the hard times and you have to work through them as a team. And I believe giving them this aid is super duper. That's what we need at the very moment. And I also believe that the next step, if you're looking at the pipeline here, is involving schools, involving colleges, involving anyone who can help the clubs sponsor-wise in the market to kind of give more security to these players one way or the other by paying some bills or paying the transportation, as you said, etc. So it's not that much of an investment, or maybe even help them so that they can take classes while playing esports and being supported there. It's crucial, definitely.
Well, I totally agree what Spiro and Christian said. I really love what you guys are doing in your countries. I definitely want to talk to you more about this and share experiences after the meeting. So let's scale something. I will answer that questions about schools being involved and also universities, but from a business perspective, okay? It is really important to have a geographical segmentation, which in esports is not happening because it's online, it's global, and it's really awesome to have players from 8 different countries. But for the business, it's awful. It's really difficult to get a regional partnership or sponsorship from a brand. It's really difficult. So for any business, you need to know where you are and what are your best options to get financiation, founding. There you go. So if you can have a school team or a university team, you can go search for local stores to finance your team in the smallest ways, because I don't know, AMD or Intel or HyperX sponsors everything, so it doesn't count. But all the other brands, they will not sponsor a team with 100 followers on Instagram or 3 viewers on a stream. But maybe the local grocery store or the local pharmacy or the local radio station can sponsor you with a little bit of money. So it's really important to have that, because in the business point of view, it's easier to start doing that than going globally from the start. And that's the case of Facebook communities. You have groups with 200,000 people that they never monetize because it's impossible. They don't have events, they don't have tournaments. They usually they didn't have that. So in the business perspective of having schools and universities involved, it's really important to start making the people focus on playing with their friends or with close people, people from close by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I mean, you know, we currently deal with 3 universities and about 20 high schools here in Vancouver, and a large part of it is because on their end it comes down to 2 hurdles that they face constantly, and those 2 hurdles are infrastructure and space. And so for schools, space is always at a premium, right? There are classes that are too large; they need space to handle, you know, gym classes or science classes. So to give up space for a new industry that requires a lot of infrastructure is always a challenge. And then the second part is the infrastructure. Equipment's expensive. You need internet that can be very expensive, power upgrades that can be expensive. And so again, to invest in something like that at a school level is very difficult. And so we're lucky. We built our facility, but the schools that we work with, they had the infrastructure for esports perspective in place. They were just playing online or bringing their PCs to school and plugging in and playing there. And so we didn't do the work to really get those schools to build those programs. They were already built. What we've done is just given them a place to play, but also because our facility is kind of mobile, is we actually will go to high schools when they're having like their regional playoffs, and we'll set up a production from their high school and stream it to Twitch for them, and we'll bring the PCs and all the equipment and all of that stuff, because it's important to cultivate that development. But more importantly, I think it's important for the industry, because there's a lot of negative stigmas, especially from some of the older generation, around what gaming is. And when you have it as part of a school program, it also automatically gets connected with subjects like math and science and history. And so it becomes acceptable. Inherently, it becomes acceptable. And I think that's really, really important. The last thing I'll touch on, just due to time, is recruiting. I think it's great for schools to have these esports clubs, because it helps with recruiting. It helps bring potential students to their school and gives them an edge over other schools that may not have those programs. So I could talk about this forever, but I'll end it there.
Thank you, guys. Actually, we're being given the signal that we need to cut it here. This being fascinating. Like I said, I'm going to watch this replay. I'm definitely going to contact with you guys. Anybody from our audience, if you want to reach out, I'm pretty sure you're going to have all of our information somewhere. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you, the audience. I mean, this has been fascinating, and hopefully there was value for everybody here.
Miguel, could I give a quick answer to Andres' question?
I think you literally, Nico, have to do it. Tienes 30 segundos y no más. Solo 30 segundos.
Andre, about your question, all the publishers and all the games have community guidelines that you can check in their websites. You don't really need to contact them to do this kind of events in school, for example, or high school or universities. But it's really cool if you do, because they can give you prizes to give to the people. So you have 2 ways: of you read the community guidelines, or you send them an email.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dirk. Take it over.
Cheers.
Nice to meet you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.